Book 1, The Axis of the World. Part I, The Golden Bridle. Chapter 1. The year was 1227 Anno Domini, a summer encampment on the Amur River. The heat hung over the camp so thickly that the haze shimmered above the ground like smoke from an invisible fire. Even the dragonflies, usually frantic, hung lazily in the air. The army, hardened in the icy winds of the Sion Mountains and the scorching sands of Khwarezm, was wilting from the unfamiliar, humid heat. But it was not the heat that gripped the warriors' souls. A silence had fallen, heavy as a sky before a storm, the silence of waiting. In the center of the camp, under the guard of faithful Keshigten, whose faces were as immobile as bronze masks, stood a large felt gur covered with white woolen cloth. Inside, it smelled of dried herbs, mutton fat, and silent anxiety. The body of the Lord of the Steppe lay on soft furs. Once mighty as the trunk of an ancient cedar, it now seemed desiccated and light. His face, etched with wrinkles, the traces of past campaigns, winds, and thoughts, was turned towards the peak of the gur, where a patch of copper-colored, heat-blasted sky was visible through the smoke-hole. But he did not see it. The gaze from the two embers smoldering in their deep sockets was turned inward, towards those distances where his horse's hooves had not yet trod. Did he see the cool forests of the land of the Khaitans, towards which his path lay? Or was he saying farewell to the endless steppe, his mother and nurturer? Death had already entered the gur. She was not a bony old woman with a scythe. She was the silence, the chill at the very heart, the lightness in the bones, beckoning him to surrender, to sleep. She had already cast her shadow, but hesitated to take the soul in which an indomitable will still smoldered. They stood by the bedside, the four pillars that held the empire from the Altai to the Great Wall of China, the four arrows in Temujin's quiver. On the right, his powerful arms crossed over his chest, stood Chagatai, the second son. His high cheekboned face, so like his father's, was like a strong bow. In his eyes, not so much grief as grim resolve. He was already mentally trying on the burden of the Khagan, believing that only his iron fist and unwavering fidelity to the Yasa, the law, could hold the realm from disintegration. A wolf pack is strong only when led by a strong leader, is what sounded in his heart. Beside him, slightly apart, stood Jochi, the firstborn. Tall, slightly stooped, his face bearing the seal of eternal bitterness. His dark eyes were fixed on his father, but they seemed to see something else. The sidelong glances of the Noyons, the whispers behind his back. Merket Seed. He had drunk the cup of doubt since youth, and even his martial prowess and his lot, a vast ulus in the west, could not heal this wound. What would await him when his father, the only one who, despite everything, acknowledged his blood as his own, was gone? To the left of the bed, kneeling on one knee, was Tolui, the youngest, the keeper of the hearth. His face, usually animated and passionate, was now contorted by silent suffering. His father's favorite, he was ready to give his own life, his own blood, to buy one more day, one more breath for Temujin. His devotion was simple and clear, like the strike of a blade. And finally, Ogedei, the third son. He stood slightly behind, his kind, full face scorched by sorrow. He looked upon his father not only as the great Khagan, but as an old, tired man. Ogedei, whose mind was flexible and soul broad, perhaps alone among them, understood it was not only about conquests. It was about what would remain after. Suddenly, Genghis Khan's lips quivered. The silence shuddered with them. "Too quiet," he whispered, his voice like the rustle of dry grass. As before a battle, when the enemy hides behind a hill. All four started, stepping forward. Tolui raised his head, his eyes gleaming with hope. "The enemies are far, father," Ogedei said quietly. "The horde is at your feet." Not those enemies, Genghis Khan uttered slowly, turning his head with effort. His gaze, sharp and clear, scorched each of his sons. The most treacherous enemies do not hide in foreign steppes. They nest here. He barely perceptibly jabbed a withered finger at his own chest. And here. His glance slid over their faces. Fear, greed, stupidity. He fell silent, gathering strength. He breathed heavily, with a wheeze. No, not now, not here. I will not lay down my arms until I have forged you, not into 4 swords, but into 1 shield for the entire realm. I will live longer, as long as it takes for you to understand the strength of the horde is not in the multitude of tribes, but in making all tribes pull 1 lasso in 1 direction. He fell back onto the pillows, and a tired yet triumphant smile spread across his face. The shadow of death retreated, defeated not by medicine, but an undomitable desire. "Send for Yelu Chuchai," he commanded, and the steel notes were back in his voice.
The news that Temujin Genghis Khan had cast off his illness and was summoning his advisors spread through the camp faster than a racehorse. The heavy waiting was replaced by wary activity. Couriers flew from ger to ger. In the air, so recently stifled and dead, the sounds of curt commands, the neighing of horses, and the clang of weapons rang out once more. The steppe was awakening from its stupor. The first to enter the Khan's ger were 2 men whose destinies should never have crossed, a Chinese scholar and a Mongol warrior. Yelu Chuchai, a descendant of Khitan emperors, a man in the long robes of a learned man, with the face of an ascetic and eyes that saw not only the visible world, but also the hidden numbers and patterns within it. He carried not a sword, but the wisdom of a millennia-old empire, which the Mongols were just preparing to conquer. He was respected, but sometimes shunned, as one shuns an unfamiliar, though useful, beast. And Mukhali, the faithful Noyon, one of Temujin's closest companions since they were young and herded horses over the surrounding hills. His face, weathered by steppe storms, was etched with scars, the marks of loyalty. He was simple and direct as an arrow, and did not understand the intricacies of Chinese thought, but he believed in the stars, his horse, and the will of the Khagan. They knelt by the bedside. Genghis Khan, now sitting up on the furs, propped up by pillows, looked at them with a heavy, studying gaze. "Rise," he commanded. His voice was still weak, but the familiar steel was already ringing in it. "Death came closer to me than the most daring enemy, but it retreated, because our work is not finished, because I had a dream." He paused, letting them absorb his words. "Not a dream of new lands, but a dream of what will become of the lands already conquered. I saw my sons, my eagles, clawing and pecking at each other over the carcass of a freshly killed ox, and the pack of jackals waiting on the sidelines was ready to rush in and steal their prize." Mukhali glanced grimly at the sons standing at the entrance to the ger. Yelu Chuchai maintained imperturbable calm, only his slender fingers slightly interlaced. "I will live longer, but not for new campaigns. For one campaign, the last one. We march not on the Jin Empire. We march on ourselves." He turned to Yelu Chuchai. "You, wise advisor, often told me that one can conquer an empire from horseback, but one cannot rule it from horseback. The time has come to test your words. I give you free rein. From this day, your words on governing lands, on collecting taxes, on laws for settled people, will be as important to my ears as reports on the size of an enemy army." Then his gaze fell on Mukali. "And you, my faithful friend, will take a different lasso into your hands. You will be my right hand here in the steppe. You will remind all Noyons, great and small, what it means to be loyal not only to me, but to the cause that will outlive us. You will be the spine that holds the ribs of the yurt, while I strengthen its foundation." Then he beckoned his sons. They approached, and a mixture of hope, fear, and bewilderment could be read in their eyes. "Listen, both of you," he said, now looking at Chagatai, now at Jochi. "You whose glances clash like sabers in a duel. From this hour your duel is over. Chagatai, you are the guardian of the Yasa. Your task is to ensure the law is observed from east to west. But remember, law without mercy is a bowstring drawn too tight, which will snap at the most crucial moment." "Jochi," the Kagan's voice softened, "you will have all the western uluses under your hand, but not as an appanage prince, but as a viceroy of a united empire. Your task is not to collect tribute, but to build roads, to strengthen bridges between tribes, so that a merchant from Khwarezm can walk without fear to the Chinese wall under the protection of our word." He swept his heavy gaze over all present. "Remember this, all of you. A wolf hunting alone may eat, but only the wolf clan that sticks together is strong. Our strength is not in how much land we take, but in how many peoples we can make pull one lasso in one direction, the lasso of unity." Silence fell in the ger, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Each was pondering what they had heard. Yelu Tuchai saw the beginning of a great imperial machine. Mukali saw a new testament of loyalty. The sons saw a responsibility hitherto unknown. And beyond the walls of the ger, the wind roamed the steppe, dispersing the last traces of sickness. The great relaying of the foundation of the realm that was to last for centuries had begun. Chapter 2. Several weeks had passed. Summer was waning, and the air in the steppe had become transparent and cool. The camp of the Lord of the Steppe was a hive of activity, akin to the gathering of a great army before a battle. But this battle was to be unlike any other. Genghis Khan's ger had become the nexus of the empire. Here, overcoming thousands of versts, messengers streamed in from Tumen and Mingan commanders, administering uluses from the bends of the Amur to the coasts of the Caspian Sea. They brought not only gifts and oaths of loyalty, but also reports, accounts, and petitions. And each man, leaving the Kagan's presence, carried away in his heart not only relief, but also a hitherto unseen anxiety. The old ways were changing. Genghis Khan himself, having subdued his illness through force of will, seemed rejuvenated. His flesh was still weak, but his spirit burned with a clear, cold flame. On this day he had ordered a small council of his most trusted men. In the ger, besides his sons, Yelu Chuchai and Mukali, were two others, Subutai the Bahadur, an old wolf whose military cunning was known everywhere a Mongol horse's hoof had trod, and Borchu, one of Temujin's first and most loyal friends, whose devotion had been tested by hungry years and the betrayal of enemies. "You sit on your furs, Kagan, yet deeds are being done that make the very earth hum." Borchu was the first to break the silence, frowning in a friendly manner. "Couriers race as if fleeing from a tumen of enemies. What have you planned? Speak, for my old head cannot comprehend it." Genghis Khan smirked. This simple, direct speech was to his liking. "I have planned, old friend, what we dreamed of by the campfire when we had but a single 10 of riders at our backs. I have planned an eternity for our cause." He let his gaze sweep over those assembled. "The Jin kingdom is a tough nut, but we will crack it. That is a matter of time and the firm hands of Subutai and my sons." Subutai, sitting as still as a stone, gave a slight nod, his eyes gleaming. "But I look further. I look to the sunset." Everyone froze. The sunset, this was not merely a direction. It was all that lay beyond the explored lands, unknown kingdoms, forests, mountains, and peoples about which only vague rumors circulated. "Our scouts and merchants bring news. Beyond the great plain where the Kipchaks roam lie lands of settled peoples who build stone nests and pray to a god in tall houses. They are rich, but divided. They war amongst themselves like wolves over carrion. Their strength is in stone and iron, but their weakness is here." He tapped his finger to his temple. "You wish to lead the horde there?" asked Chagatai, his voice a mix of approval and challenge. "We will conquer them." "Not only conquer, but to bind them, to tie them into one great knot that no one will dare to untie. The campaign to the sunset will not be a raid. It will be an extending of the hand, an iron hand in a steel gauntlet." He turned to Yelu Chuchai. "Your task, wise advisor, is to prepare minds for this. We will take with us not only warriors, we will take scribes, architects, healers. We will show these peoples not only the power of our saber, but the benefit of our law. You will draw up the codes by which they will live under our hand." Then his gaze fell upon Subutai. "And your task, old Bahadur, is to find not the shortest, but the surest paths. Scout fords, mountain passes, sites for settled camps. This campaign must become not a plundering, but the building of a road upon which not only our 2 men will travel, but also caravans with silk, knowledge, and steel for 1,000 years to come." A silence filled with the grandeur of the concept fell upon the Gair. Even the battle-hardened warriors, men who had seen much, could not immediately grasp the scale of the Khagan's plan. It was not about conquering a tribe or a kingdom, but about creating a new world. "And what of us?" asked Ogedei quietly, who always thought more broadly than the others. "You, my sons," said Genghis Khan, "will be my eyes and hands on this path. Chagatai, to ensure the law is upheld unwaveringly. Jochi, to ensure new peoples enter our horde without unnecessary bloodshed. Tolu, to ensure the spirit of the warriors does not fade. And you, Ogedei," the Khagan looked intently at his 3rd son, "you will observe all this and think about how to hold it all together when I am gone." He rose from the woolen pillows, and everyone involuntarily straightened up. "Remember this day. Today we begin to weave not just a lasso for new lands. We begin to weave the fate of the world. And the end of this rope must be firmly tied to our beginning." The council lasted deep into the night. When it had dispersed, Genghis Khan stepped out of the Gair. Countless stars shone over the endless steppe, plunged into darkness. He looked at them, and an unshakable certainty grew in his heart. His will, like an arrow shot by a mighty hand, must pierce not only space, but time itself.
Autumn had clad the steppe in crimson and gold. An atmosphere reigned in Genghis Khan's camp similar to that of a skilled jeweler, meticulously working a precious stone, striving to reveal its inner light. The great campaigns were postponed. A time of building from within was coming. On one such day, Genghis Khan summoned Yilu Chutsai. They sat in the part of the Khan's gur set aside for councils. Between them, on a low table, lay scrolls with Chinese characters and sheets with columns of numbers written in the firm hand of the learned man. "Speak, wise advisor," said Genghis Khan, peering at the strange symbols. "Show me the power hidden in these black signs. I have conquered many tribes, but I have not conquered numbers." Yilu Chutsai bowed his head respectfully. His long sleeve swept gracefully through the air as he pointed to a scroll. "Great Khagan, the saber conquers the land, but only number and law can hold it. Behold, this is a report on the taxes from the regions of northern China that are already under your palm." He began to explain. Yilu Chutsai did not speak of feats. He spoke of harvests, of crafts, of the flows of copper, silk, and grain. He painted a picture of an invisible world, a world of economics, where wealth was born not from plunder, but from labor and order, before the astonished Genghis Khan. "You can plunder a city and gain treasure once," Yilu Chutsai said, his eyes burning with a calm light. "But if you establish a fair tax, the city will pay you treasure every year, from generation to generation. One warrior can take 10 trophies, but one good official can bring 10,000 trophies without drawing his sword." Genghis Khan, accustomed to the simplicity of steppe laws, listened in silence. He saw how from the numbers and columns rose the edifice of an unbreakable power, far more durable than any fortress. "So the strength of an empire is not in the number of warriors, but in the number of rice fields?" he said slowly, grasping the essence. "In the number of rice fields that reliably pay taxes, which reliably feed the warriors who protect those fields," Yilu Chutsai clarified. "It is a circle of might. Break it, and the might will crumble." That day, Genghis Khan made a decision that stunned his entourage. He granted Yilu Chutsai unprecedented powers for tax collection and the creation of an administrative apparatus. For the first time, a nomadic conqueror voluntarily began building a system of governance based on the principles of the conquered sedentary civilizations. While Yilu Chutsai laid the financial and bureaucratic backbone of the empire, another, no less important work was being carried out by the loyal Mukali. He did not sit over scrolls. He rode around the camps of the Noyons, feasted with them in their gurs, listened to their stories and complaints, and in every conversation, like a skilled blacksmith, he forged a single will. "The Khagan is recovering," he would say, clinking cups of sour kumis with one commander after another. "But his strength now lies not only in the hand that holds the saber, it is in his thought. He is building something that will outlive us and our grandsons." "Building? Out of what?" the old warriors would frown. "We are warriors. We take spoils in battle." "True," Mukali would nod. "But what is more valuable, to take a sheep from a neighbor once, or to become the kind of master to whom the neighbor himself drives a sheep every year? He is building a house called Empire. And this house must have strong walls, our tumens, but it must also have a sturdy roof, laws, and a full hearth, wealth. Otherwise this house will be cold and hungry, and people will scatter to their own corners." With simple words and examples from the life of the steppe, Mukali conveyed the great design of Genghis Khan to the stern Noyons. He extinguished the sprouts of envy and misunderstanding, binding the steppe's free-born warriors into a single organism, capable not only of conquest, but of construction. And Genghis Khan,
During this time, listening to the reports of both men, mentally assembled these bricks into a single whole. He saw how his will, embodied through the mind of the Chinese scholar and the loyalty of the Mongol, was beginning to take real, unbreakable form. One evening, alone with Borchu, he said, "Before, I thought strength lay in a fast horse and a sharp saber. Now I see, true strength is in making a river flow in the direction you want, with a single word." Borchu, after a silence, replied, "The river is strong, but it can sweep away even the one who tries to direct it. Be careful, old friend." But Genghis Khan only smiled into his gray mustache. He no longer felt merely as a rider on the bank, but the riverbed itself, destined to receive the waters of all the world's rivers.
Chapter 3. The winter that year came early and harsh. The steppe was buried in snow, as if covered by the white hide of a freshly taken beast. But the fierce frost that gripped the land was nothing compared to the cold creeping towards the heart of the empire. The new currents emanating from the Kagan's Gur had reached the distant Uluses and stirred not just murmuring, but a sullen, furious ferment. Breaking through the blizzards, 3 Noyons from the old guard, those who had fought side by side with Temujin back when he was an outcast pursued by the Merkits, arrived at Genghis Khan's headquarters. Their names were Kadar, Darmala, and Kachyon. Their faces, weathered and tough as old oak, were darker than winter clouds. They entered the Gur without hiding their resentment, and, barely performing the required bows, Kadar, the eldest and most respected, stepped forward. "Kagan," his voice thundered like a hoof striking frozen ground. "Rumors have reached us that you have given the reins of power to a sedentary Chinese, that our warriors, who won you victories with their blood, must now report to scribes in hats with tassels. Explain yourself, or tell us plainly, do you still need your old wolves, or only learned jackals who know how to count bones?" The air in the Gur grew thick. Chagatai and Mukali, standing at a distance, frowned, their hands involuntarily moving towards their belts. Such direct defiance, even from veteran Noyons, smelled of rebellion. But Genghis Khan did not flare up. He slowly raised his eyes to the old warriors, and his gaze held not anger, but a deep, weary sadness. "Kadar, Darmala, and Kachyon," he said quietly, yet his words carried clearer than any shout. "Do you remember that year when we, hungry and frozen, shared one old mare amongst us all? When our palaces were snowdrifts and our army was the crows circling overhead, waiting for us to die?" The Noyons, not expecting such a beginning, exchanged confused glances. Their severity diminished, giving way to bitter memories. "We remember," Kachyon replied hoarsely. "We were strong then because we were united, because we shared the last morsel. Now tell me, Kadar, is it easy to divide the spoils when your herd has become as vast as a sea? When your domains stretch farther than an arrow can fly? Spoils should be divided by merit in battle," Kadar grunted stubbornly. "True," Genghis Khan nodded. "But what is merit? To cut down 10 enemies? Or to provision a tumen that will cut down 10,000? Who deserves the greater share, the warrior who procures a sheep, or the shepherd who raises a flock that will feed warriors for decades to come?" He rose and walked to the smoldering hearth. "Before, we were a small pack hunting deer. Now we are the masters of the entire steppe. But if we hunt our own deer without count, what will remain for our children? A hungry steppe and bones. I do not reject your merits. I want your grandchildren to live in a steppe full of deer, not to finish the last crumbs of your glory." Then he turned and looked directly at them. "The Chinese man with his abacus is not a jackal. He is a new bow for our pack, a bow that shoots farther and more accurately than any of our old ones. I am not replacing your sabers. I am giving you this bow as well, to make you stronger, to make our empire stronger not only today but tomorrow." His speech was devoid of reproach, full of simple, clear images, understandable to any nomad. The anger of the old Noyons gradually faded, replaced by heavy contemplation. They saw not the Khan's anger, but his care for the future of their entire people. "But the scribes, these letters," Dharmala muttered, already without the former malice. "Is it harder to learn to respect a letter than to learn to strike an enemy from the left shoulder?" Genghis Khan asked softly. "Mukhali and my sons will help you. We will all learn together." When the Noyons, calmed and quieted, left the Gur, Chagatai couldn't contain himself. "Father, they should have been punished for such insolence, to set an example for others." Genghis Khan smiled sadly. "Chop off a dry branch, and you will frighten the living ones. The anger of an old wolf comes from fear. Fear of the new which he does not understand. It is better to explain to him that the new hunt promises more prey than to execute him and lose a loyal warrior. Strength lies in the ability to guide, not only to punish." That evening, watching the dancing tongues of flame in the hearth, Genghis Khan realized that he had won one of his most important victories, not on the battlefield, but in the hearts of his own people. He had not broken the old steppe steel, but had begun to temper it, giving it a new, more resilient form.
Winter passed. The snows receded, yielding to the first timid greenery. The steppe was awakening, and with it, the renewed empire was awakening. The plans conceived in the stuffy jur of the Khagan's receding illness began to materialize, and this embodiment was visible and tangible. On one spring day, an unusual caravan approached the Khagan's headquarters under the guard of a detachment of Keshiktin. These were not merchants with silk or envoys with gifts. This was a train loaded with sacks of grain, beams of quality iron, and even several carts carrying strange mechanisms, improved water lifting wheels, and machines for tanning hides. At the head of the caravan rode not a Noyon, but a modest official from Yilu Chuchai's chancellery, with wooden pesa tablets granting him authority. Genghis Khan, observing the arrival of the train from a small hill surrounded by his sons and Mukhali, silently pointed his hand at the spectacle. "Look, my children, here it is, spoils not paid for by our warriors' blood." The train was headed for the Ulus of Noyon Kharar, the very one who had loudly protested the new orders in winter. Using data from the first censuses and tax assessments, Yilu Chuchai had determined that Kharar's lands, rich in pastures, suffered from droughts in the summer months. Instead of demanding additional tribute from the Noyon, the Chinese advisor had arranged for aid to be sent to him: grain for sowing, tools for digging wells, and craftsmen to teach his people new trades. A few weeks later, Kharar himself appeared at the headquarters. His face was no longer sullen. He dismounted and, approaching Genghis Khan, performed a deep bow, more respectful than ever before. "Khagan, your wisdom is great," he said, and his voice held genuine sincerity. "Men with numbers on papers came to me, and I expected robbery. But they brought wealth. My people now not only herd, but also sow barley by new wells. The hides they tan are stronger. My warriors are well fed and content. They say their children will live better than they do. Forgive an old fool for not seeing your design at once." This was not merely a success. It was a victory of idea over inertia. Genghis Khan, having listened to Kharar, nodded, then exchanged a glance with Yilu Chuchai, who was standing apart. The Chinese man's gaze remained calm, but a quiet satisfaction could be read deep in his eyes. Following this, a chain of similar events rippled through various uluses.
Scribes and officials, equipped with pesas and guards, were no longer perceived as a nuisance. They began to be awaited, as one awaits good news. They not only accounted, but also helped, advising where to set up winter camps, how to establish trade with settled communities without resorting to raid. Once, Ogedei, riding with his father through the surrounding lands, pointed to a bustling market that had sprung up at a river crossing. There, Mongol warriors peacefully exchanged horses and hides for grain, fabrics, and iron goods with Chinese and Uyghur merchants. It all happened under the watch of a small guard detachment maintaining order. Look, father, a year ago there might have been a slaughter here, and now a market. Is that not strength? A strength stronger than steel. Genghis Khan silently observed this spectacle. He saw his dream of a unified lasso beginning to take form. He had conquered by force, but now he was beginning to conquer by order and benefit. This was a different kind of power, more solid and enduring. That same evening, he said to Yilu Chuchai, "You were right, wise advisor. A single number on paper can achieve what 1,000 horsemen cannot. It can turn an enemy into an ally, and an ally into a loyal friend." Thus, brick by brick, the foundation of an empire meant to stand for centuries was laid, and the most important brick, trust, was beginning to take its place.
Chapter 4. The summer of that year was exceptionally hot. The air above the steppe shimmered in the heat, and the sun hung at its zenith like a copper shield. But to Genghis Khan's headquarters, like a sudden gust of icy wind, rode a messenger covered in dust and sweat from the eastern borders. His face was contorted not with fatigue, but with alarm. "Khagan, disaster!" the messenger gasped, falling to his knees. "Jin troops, not just a raid. They've gathered a huge army. They come not to raid, but to conquer. They say that since you are ill and busy with your new orders, it is the perfect time to crush us. Their vanguard units are already burning camps near the Great Wall." The news struck the headquarters like a battering ram. The old Noyans, not yet fully accustomed to the innovations, greeted it with grim triumph. Their eyes said, "See, while you were fiddling with papers, the enemy did not sleep. Now we will show them." An urgent council was convened. The Gur filled with loud, angry voices. "I told you so," thundered one of the old commanders. "We shouldn't have cancelled the annual tribute-gathering campaigns. We let our guard down. Now see the result. We must gather all Tumans immediately and march to meet them. Crush this serpent's head," echoed another. But Genghis Khan, having heard all opinions, remained calm. His gaze was turned not to the heated Noyans, but to Yilu Chuchai and Subutai. "What say you, wise advisor?" he asked the Chinese man. "You know the Jin's ways and strength." "I will say, Khagan, that this is no accident. It is a calculation. They see the changes in our state and hope we are divided. They want to lure us into the field and force a pitched battle near the walls of their fortresses, where their infantry and engineers will be stronger." Then Subutai spoke. The old Bahadur had been silently tracing a map drawn on a carpet with his finger. "They are right about one thing," he finally said, and everyone fell silent. "They come not to raid. They come for war. But they make one mistake. Before, we would have been like an enraged bull, easily lured into a trap. But now," he raised his eyes to the Khagan, and the familiar fire of a predator flared in them. "Now we have not only claws, but the vision of an eagle." And Subutai laid out his plan. It was not a plan for a furious frontal assault to which the Mongols were accustomed. It was a complex, multi-stage maneuver based on precise intelligence data now supplied not only by mounted scouts, but also by merchants and defectors attracted by rumors of the Mongols' just governance. "We will not march on their army. We will lure their army to us. We will withdraw the livestock and people deeper into the steppe, leaving the enemy without forage. Our mobile units will exhaust them, cut their supply trains, deprive them of water. We know every path, every stream, and when they are tired and wavering, then we will strike."
The plan was risky. It required incredible endurance and discipline. Before, under the old ways, when every Noyan was a Khan unto himself, it would have been impossible. But now, with the Kagan's will as law and communication between the Uluses established, it became a reality. Genghis Khan listened and nodded. He saw not only military cunning, but a deeper meaning. "Good," he said. "Let it be so. Let the Jinn see they are dealing not with a pack of wolves fighting over prey, but with one single fist that can both clench and unclench as needed." Orders were given. The empire, recently engaged in peaceful construction, transformed in an instant. But this was not a chaotic, hasty mobilization. It was a clear, coordinated movement. Couriers carried instructions to the tribal Noyans. The Uluses began an organized retreat, covered by flying detachments of horse archers. When the huge cumbersome Jin army, bogged down in the steppe dust, advanced into the territory abandoned by the Mongols, it fell into a trap. Its supply lines were stretched, its foragers were destroyed, its wells were filled. The discipline and unity cultivated by Genghis Khan in peacetime became his main weapon in war. The first serious test of the new system had begun, and its outcome would determine not only the fate of the campaign, but the fate of the entire great endeavor.
The steppe, weary from the heat, greeted the Jin host with silent but formidable hospitality. The endless expanses, usually full of life, became a trap. Wells were filled, camps abandoned, livestock driven deep into the Uluses. The huge Jin army, accustomed to sieging fortresses and fighting in valleys, found itself in a void. The Mongol horse Tumens did not engage in battle. They circled around like wolves around a lost bull, cutting off foragers, exhausting the vanguard with endless skirmishes. The plan, born in the Jur from the union of Yelu Chukai's mind and Subutai's cunning, worked flawlessly. What would have been impossible before due to the pride of the Noyans and their thirst for immediate glory was now executed by a single will. The discipline Genghis Khan had cultivated all these months became his greatest strength. The Noyans, who had recently been eager for battle, now restrained their warriors, obeying the overall design. The decisive battle occurred where no one expected it, near the dry bed of a river, where a small detachment had lured the Jin soldiers, exhausted by thirst. When the orderly ranks of the Jin heavy infantry, seeing the desired water, broke formation, the full might of the Mongol cavalry fell upon them from the surrounding hills. It was not a battle, but a slaughter. The invincible army sent to reclaim the northern lands was utterly defeated. The captured Jin commanders were brought to Genghis Khan's headquarters, now pitched on the site of the recent carnage. They walked with heads held high, expecting humiliation and execution. But they found something else. Genghis Khan received them not on a throne of enemy bones, but in his campaign Jur. His sons, Subutai and Yelu Chukai, stood beside him. "You came here thinking you would find divided tribes. You found a united horde. You came to kill an old and sick Khan. You found a strength you cannot break." The Lord of the Steppe did not execute the captives. He released them, ordering them to tell their emperor, "Tell your sovereign, Temujin no longer wishes to be merely the scourge of God, punishing his enemies. Henceforth, I offer not only the sword, but also a road to peace. But this path lies through the recognition of our strength and our order." When the prisoners were led away, Genghis Khan stepped out of the Jur. The night was clear, and the Milky Way, the eternal blue sky, shone above his head, stretching over the entire earth. "You see, Father?" Ogedei, standing nearby, said quietly. "Your will bound us not only for war, it bound us for a victory won by wisdom. This is only the beginning, my son. We have made them reckon with our strength.
Now comes the most difficult task, to make this strength work for the future, so that not fear, but respect and benefit guide peoples under our hand. He turned and looked at his headquarters, at the smoldering campfires of the huge army, at the force that was now obedient to his thought. The great steppe has taken its first step toward becoming the axis of the world. But the long road lies ahead. The first part of the path had been traversed. Ahead lay new trials, new lands, and new peoples who were destined to feel the weight and the benefit of the iron hand of the New World Order being born in the heart of Asia.